Matt with Howe Equipment here, located in Jackson, Michigan, and we've got a common problem we see. We've got a mower here, it's doing absolutely nothing when you turn the key. So that lets you know when you turn the key and absolutely nothing's happening, that would be an electrical issue. Typically, it's a little more of a time thing than really monstrous expenses when it's purely electrical. So one helpful tip, if you've got a Toro lawnmower, first of all, and it's doing this, obviously you can't move it, so how do you move it around? There are a couple of tabs down here, and we can get this shot. You know, they're initially out, and you have to push both sides in. Actually, we'll release both transmissions, and so both of those are pushed in right now. And then a second thing you can do is you turn the key to the on position and bring the arm bars in, and you should hear the park brake release. So it all depends on electrically what's going on, because if you've got no power, the electric parking brake might not work. So in this case, there's no sound that's occurring, which means the electric parking brake is stuck. This model is a Toro Timecutter SS4225. So if you have a Toro Timecutter and it's an SS model, they're all going to be like this. So we're going to get a shot on the camera of how to manually release the electric parking brake, which is really handy to know if you're in this position, because you got to start with this and move the machine before you can even try to fix it. So let's go ahead and look under the machine and we'll show you how to manually do that. Working with Jason today, one of our mechanics, so he's going to show you how to release the electric parking brake manually right now. So let's go ahead and dive under that machine. And there is a bar that he's going to show you. You got to actually push it upward and you'll hear a little bit of a sound. Your wheels were locked, and we can test right now. See if we can push it. Now we can push it. So let's go ahead and get it in the work bay. First thing we're going to start with is check and make sure your battery is nice and strong, make sure that you don't have any loose connections. So you got to start with the simple stuff. So electrically, it all starts with the battery, and we'll get a nice turn. Well, that one is a little bit loose, so we're going to go ahead and tighten that up first. That would be a really easy fix if that's all it is. Okay, let's cross our fingers and see if she's fixed. No dice. Okay, so next we got to make sure we got a good battery. We actually have a tester here. We can see exactly what our percentage life is. So this is a product by Top Down. You can get a little bit cheaper version of this for I think around $50. And when you get it on there nice and tight and you get absolutely nothing, it means you got a dead battery. So if you didn't have a tool like this, you'd want to see if you can jump it and if it makes any difference. And in this case, we have this tester, so we know there's no need to even try to jump it. We could jump it and kind of go from there. This is actually a newer battery, but I'm guessing someone tried to put a new battery in, it did not fix the problem, then it sat for a period of time. So we're going to put a good, fresh interstate battery on this. We're an interstate dealer, and then we will proceed forward. So we got Jason tightening up this new battery, and I just heard a sound, so that's a great sign that it might just be a battery. We got the new battery in. Jason, let's see if it starts up right now. That easy, that's how you fix a lawnmower. So obviously, usually the problem's not as simple as a battery. So even though it's simple in this case, we take these videos not knowing necessarily what's gonna happen. What would have been the next progression to see electrically if absolutely nothing is happening? So obviously we're up and running, but if that wouldn't have worked, what we'd have went to next is we'd have checked the solenoid. That's the only thing between the battery and the starter that supplies power to the motor. So basically how your solenoid works is you have power coming and it runs to the solenoid. That's the solenoid right there. So think of the solenoid as a switch. Think of like a light switch on a wall, and it takes an action for that light switch to get pressed, essentially. So when you turn the key, there is power, a signal wire that comes down here, and I think is it this one in this case? And when you turn the key, there should be power coming from this area. So if this would not have started, I would have, been thinking possibly the solenoid is bad, and we got to see is the solenoid getting power like it's supposed to. So we'd have next pulled this wire, the signal wire, and if I turn the key, we should see this light up. If you want to do any kind of work, the tool that Jason's got, it's a test light, is essential. Now the one he's got is handy because it actually tells the amount of voltage. That told us we had 12.3 volts on there. You can get these fairly cheap and they just light up if there's power going to it. So if you're gonna do any kind of this work, I'd at least suggest getting a tool like this. Obviously this system's working and there is signal that's going to the solenoid. So if I would have not gotten anything in that case, then I would have potentially been looking to wonder if my key switch is doing its job, if it's not supplying a signal to the solenoid. So it was doing its job. Another thing to check is there's actually a ground wire on here. So if we flip this up, your test light, the way he had this hooked on before is it was on the negative and he had to, it'll light up, right, if it's receiving power. So before he had it hooked on the negative, if we switch this, we can actually see if the ground is working, and it is now showing that he's touching ground. So this other side is a ground wire. We will make sure that that's grounding like it's supposed to. And when I turn the key, it stays grounded, which is the way it's supposed to be. Sometimes you jump to replacing a solenoid too quickly and really ground is the issue. So it's really important to check that and make sure that ground wire is consistently staying grounded throughout that process. So if everything was checking out the right way, if the signal wire is doing what it's supposed to do, if the ground is working, then that means everything is coming to this box, this solenoid, the right way, and we got power right here, and it's still not transferring energy. And that's potentially when you have a bad solenoid. And these are really easy to replace. There's a bolt here, there's a bolt on the other side. These are gonna hook up the same sort of way. So obviously these big posts are the main supply of power. And from this, if you trace this through, it goes down to your starter, which is hard for us to see in this particular case, but we can do the same sort of thing with his test light, and he can test when we're turning the key, and he can make sure that there is power getting to this point, and when he turns the key, he can test to see if there's power getting to this point. And when all those other things work and there's no power getting to this point, that's when it's time to replace the solenoid. If there is power getting to this point, that means that the solenoid is doing its job. When you turn the key, it's supposed to allow power to go through, and that's when we'd work our way up the line and confirm that the rest of this wire, we'd go to the bolt on the starter, and we would make sure that there is power getting to the starter. And if there's power getting to the starter and nothing's happening there, that's when you'd probably want to look and potentially wonder if your starter's going bad. So there's some other things. There can be wires that can be really hard to go through. If your ground is not working, that's when you really need to go in and take it to a shop, because there's numerous switches on here that allow that to stay in the grounded position. And if your arm bars are out, if you're not sitting out, there's all sorts of reasons that it's not going to let this ground. And so that's where it can get kind of dicey to go through and check some stuff. But this is a simple way to kind of check and see what's going on if you get an electrical issue. So a couple cheap tools will really help you get your lawnmower up and running if you're in this situation. So more than likely the culprit is the battery and only the battery, but we always like to test when it comes through our shop to make sure that the charging system is doing its job, because if that battery die prior to that or not work because the charging system doesn't work, and so it's a very easy thing to check. Before we actually dive in and see what the charging system's doing, just to show you how this system works, a simple battery test, and we can see on this one, obviously this is a brand new battery, so this will tell us the percentage life of the battery, and it will also tell us the percentage charge. That's what's kind of nice we like about this tool. And so this one says that it's 100% healthy and 95% charged. So obviously once the customer uses this once or twice, it's going to charge that battery up if the charging system's working like it's supposed to. To do a test on the charging system, got to have it running, and we can see what kind of voltage it's kicking out. The way that the charging system works on this is this motor has a stator, and it works off magnets basically that creates a current, and then it goes through a voltage regulator to get the proper amount of voltage through. So if either one of those two components aren't working, we could have a charging issue. So let's go ahead and see if it's charging. I gotta have it running, and then we'll run the test. So this showed that it was charging normal. Anything in the high 13s is good. We don't want it to be too high up near 17 or anything like that either. So that means the stator's kicking out enough juice and the voltage regulator is getting the proper amount of charge to that battery. So this is ready to get back to the customer. May do a full tune-up on it while it's here in the shop. Simple one today for Howe equipment, but in case it's not that simple for you, I hope some of those other tips helped you on what to check if you've got an electrical problem.